Thank you. Elliot is the senior manager of communications and community engagement. So he is here to communicate with us and engage us in discussion and tell us more about the new King Thunderbird Center, Ogima PA Sukamik, and help us understand what its needs are and how we can contribute to those needs. I recently wrote to my city councillor, and I'll tell you more about that conversation later. But please welcome Elliot Tanti.
Thank you. Hi, it's a real honor and a privilege to be here today. The Hosanna family has been a part of my family for, well, nearly my entire life. And it's very special to be here with you. I know Carl's been talking about this for a while. I'll tell you, it's taken as long as it has, not because of Carl, but because of me and several scheduling conflicts. And so I really am thankful for the flexibility and opportunity to speak with you today. So I've got a loose sort of agenda here and things we're going to talk about. And obviously we have a big project that we want to discuss. But my intention and my hope is that we can have a free-flowing conversation. I think that there's lots of misconceptions about people experiencing homelessness, poverty, stigma, but there's also people are worried because they don't want to ask offensive questions or say something offensive that they don't because it's something that they don't understand. And it's a really challenging topic. So what we try and do at Boyle Street is really it's about creating safe spaces to have open and honest conversations. And today, believe me, there's no question that you can ask that we haven't heard before. And I'd be more than willing to take you through some of those things. I have some questions that we already prepared, but that's the goal today. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about our organization, what we do, how we operate, some of the history, some of the guiding values and principles of how we operate. Then I'm going to speak to you about Ogama Piatsu Gamik, and that was outstanding Cree, well done. Or the King Thunderbird Center, what the goal is, where we're at in the project, and how you can help. And then we can kind of open up into more of a free-flowing conversation. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge both Pastor James and Anna. I think, and I know they've created a culture of love, compassion, and community out of this space. And I know just one example of that is the food bank that they operate here every week. And I'll tell you, it's one thing to have a service provider come in and be able to provide those services. It's something completely different when you create a place of warmth, dignity, and respect so that people in the lowest point in their life feel safe enough to come and use that services. And it's a real credit to the community that you've built here, and I want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge the church council that's invited me here today. I know a couple of the members. But again, thank you for the invite and for welcoming me here. I also want to acknowledge two very special people in my life. Reverend Donald Olson, who's just turned 21 plus 70 last week, and his wife, Beth Olson, who of course are my grandparents. For the first part of my life, I knew them as the place where we always had to say grace before dinner. The second part of my life, it's really been a place where they've taught me about living with grace. And I owe a lot of who I am as a person and my commitment to the work that I do, to the values that they've taught. And I just want to acknowledge that too. Okay, so that's my acknowledgements. Let's get into and talking about the project and the organization. Has anyone ever heard of Boyle Street Community Services before? Yeah, you might have seen this on the news a couple times. Go to a hockey game. It's that one of our buildings is that blue building next to the arena, which we're going to talk about a little bit better later. But I think it's important to kind of contextualize the size of the organization, the scope of the work that we do. While we're known for that building, we actually operate 15 locations across the city in various different capacities. Everything from housing to other community centers, places for people to live, a women's housing project. We also engage in group care. So we take care of kids who are in care, and their ages range from 2 to 22. And I can talk a little bit about why we do that a little bit later. We have 550 staff across our city. And I'm really proud of the colleagues and the people that I get to work with. But in terms of scope and scale, we're one of the largest charities in the city and we're part of the top 1% in terms of size of charities in the country. We also own a couple social enterprises. Does anyone know what a social enterprise is? What do you know about them?
Where you have a business where people with very low skills can get jobs and get work.
Absolutely. That's right on. Well, how we would define it though is we say a social enterprise is a business that has a general good social outcome. So it may be providing employment to people that wouldn't necessarily do it. And we do certainly do that. A social enterprise can also do good in the community. And that's what we try and do with that as well too. We own 3 social enterprises. The first one you may have heard of is 4 Directions Financial. Yes, we own a bank. It's a partnership with ATB Financial, and it's specifically designed so that those that are experiencing homelessness and poverty can access banks too. And what we've learned is sometimes it's just the easiest, most simple things are the greatest barriers for those that we serve. You know, if you want to know more about the bank, my sister Nina worked there for 2 years nearly. It's really changed the dynamic and provided services in a way that is unique and really speaks to the way in which we operate as an organization. We try to be innovative. The other social enterprise that you may have heard of is called Hire Good, HIRE good.ca. That's the website, but Hire Good. And there we do employ people that we serve. One of the greatest misconceptions about people experiencing homelessness and poverty is that they don't want to work. But what we know, and we know for a fact, is that it's not about wanting to, it's about there are systemic barriers that keep them from being able to work. And so that organization, we call it second, third, fourth, fifth chance employment. Our goal is to give people opportunities to always come back and always participate and make money. Some people that will come and work for Hire Good will be there and they'll move on. And we've had people go from, you know, a frontline role in Hire Good all the way through to becoming construction foreman. And that's a really great story and that's awesome. But we also know there's going to be people that work for Hire Good and that will be their job, the rest of the job for the rest of their life or the rest of their working. And that's fine too. And I think that approach, that model really speaks to how our organization operates. We talk a lot about meeting people where they're at. And we're meeting people where they're at is the first step to building safety and trust. So that's how we operate as an organization. Boyle Street's mission is to end chronic homelessness. Does anyone know the difference between homelessness and chronic homelessness? Have that ever heard that differentiation before? Basically, yeah, you have for sure. Basically, when we talk about chronic homelessness, we talk about entrenchment. So people that have been involved in the cycle for more than 6 months. Typically, the barriers are much higher. The lifestyle is much more difficult. And so our interventions need to be a little bit more precise and direct in that piece. And that's how we operate as an organization. There's also 2 main pillars of our organization in terms of how we approach our work that are really important. First and foremost, we don't have a religious affiliation. We work with all faiths and all communities. And that's really important to us as an organization. But central to the work that we do, through every piece of programming, services that we provide, we talk a lot about Indigenous culture and ceremony. And Indigenous culture and ceremony is present in everything that we do. We have a couple programs, Indian Residential Schools Program, Missing Murdered Women and Girls Program, and they provide specific services to Indigenous people, but they're also funded to help us provide culture and ceremony across our organization. And the example that I use is we offer 40 programs and services in our organization. Every one of those programs and services this summer will be out on the land picking medicine so that they can use it in their community. We know that so many of the people that we've worked with have had their culture and their ceremony stripped away from them. They've been made to feel ashamed for who they are and how they practice. And by bringing culture back into their lives in a healthy and supported way, we could see outstanding outcomes in terms of getting people through the barriers that they're facing in their life. So that Indigenous culture and ceremony is that first pillar. The other pillar of our organization that's really critical and is really the forefront of the work that we do is that we're a harm reduction based organization. Has anyone ever heard the term harm reduction before? What do you know about it?
It's where you don't look for total abstinence of a behavior or a lifestyle, but it's a graduated approach where people can either maintain at a certain level or use success to dial down as they go forward. Absolutely.
And generally, I'm sure you're referencing, harm reduction is thought of in relations to substance use, right? You know, a supervised consumption site, a needle distribution center, those type of things. But the broader definition of harm reduction, and yours is completely right. But when we talk about harm reduction, really what we're talking about is reducing harm. We know that every day, every single person engages in behavior that is slightly unsafe. Many of you, if not all, drove here today. It is just generally more dangerous than walking. So what do? We put on a seatbelt. A seatbelt is a harm reduction practice. That we just take that model and we apply it to all of the work that we do. Bars are safe consumption sites, right? So, and harm reduction, the idea is that everyone engages in various forms of unsafe behavior. So let's try and do it as safely as possible. It's critical and important to our work because, as I said, we meet people where they're at. And oftentimes people are dealing with very serious and chronic challenges, substance use being one of them. But below that, and I think more importantly, and we can talk about this a little bit more because I think misconceptions around homeless people and drugs are rampant across our community. But generally, what we're really talking about is supporting people who have unresolved, very serious traumas that they've experienced in their life. Physical, mental, sexual abuse, many times, oftentimes many times over. And so when we talk about things like harm reduction, it's because oftentimes the people we're working with don't have access to the same sort of healthcare and services that you and I may have access to. And so they self-regulate and self-medicate. And so when we approach them, we want to be approaching them with the most care possible. And you're right, it's very importantly, it's a spectrum. We talk about a spectrum of care, everything from the supervised consumption site straight through to the recovery center and everything in between. That's what we're talking about in terms of a harm reduction approach. It's a spectrum of care. The way that we approach our work is sort of twofold. We talk about intervention and prevention. And for a long time as an organization, we've been really focused on intervention. We're meeting people where they're at. Generally, it's in a situation of crisis. Generally, something very troubling is going on in their life and they need immediate supports right away. And a lot of our work is in that intervention piece, keeping people safe, getting them to a more stable situation, and then learning what their goals are and moving with them forward in whatever way that is. But about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the organization realized that more needed to be done on the prevention side to ensure that fewer people were requiring interventive services. So that's where places like our group home, our family care program, our family supports program, Ubuntu, that operates on the Northeast side comes from. We're helping children, we're helping families in distress, trying to get into those spaces from a prevention angle, because we know if we aren't doing that work on that front end, 5, 10, 7 years later, they're ending up in our drop-in. And so when we think about the work and our scope and our scale, and I'm sure I saw some eyebrows raised when I said 550 staff and 15 locations and you work with kids, we're literally a birth to death organization. But we need to be able, when we're talking about issues of homelessness, poverty, and the challenges that we're facing in our community, we have to be looking at the entire spectrum and the entire challenge, start to finish. So many of the people that we deal with and work with have had some sort of interaction with the child welfare system, either themselves or their kids are part of the system. The way in which we're doing things right now is not working. And so we have to be thinking more broadly. And that's what we try to do as an organization. I've said a lot about how we approach our work and what we do. I've spoken very quickly. But I wonder, before we move on to our next initiative, if there's any questions that emerge just around our approach or what we are as an organization or how we work. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't think I heard you mention the mental illness.
Yes.
Did you mention that?
Not necessarily. When I say about things like extensive barriers and barriers in people's lives, mental health and mental illness is certainly a piece of that. And one of the challenges that we have as an organization and that we see regularly is that the cycle of poverty, the longer and more time you spend homeless, going through the shelter system, back out through the shelter system, through the recovery system, back to the street, that has prolonged and and adds to the complexity of the mental illness that we're facing in our community. And I think one of the challenges that's emerged in the last little bit is people are scared and people are concerned, and they're seeing people that are very ill on their streets. It's because we have a mental health crisis, but because the challenges, the acuity, the substantive nature of the barriers have grown so much because of chronic homelessness, prolonged time on the streets, there's just a massive gap in services in that space. So Boyle Street can only go this far. And AHS starts here. And what you're seeing on the streets, when you're seeing in your ravines, when you're seeing encampments, and you're seeing mental illness or someone in distress, is what's in between. And who faces the brunt of it? It's homeowners and who have property damage or who are walking in their communities. It's business owners and the challenges that they face. EPS, which is not the appropriate response. The chief would tell you that, but it's really all we've got. So what we're trying to do as an organization, bring things a little bit closer. And on the advocacy front, we're trying to bring AHS a little bit closer as well too, because mental health is health, and we need to be pushing our government to do that in a more substantive way. It's a great question, and thank you for raising it. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we have a plan. Boyle Street has this old building. It's this big blue building. Oh, there's another question?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. And if you're going to talk about this later, feel free to say, wait.
Yeah, no.
But how do you interact with the other agencies that are down in that area, like the Hope Mission, the Herb Jameson Center, Mustard Seed, all of those? Do you interact so the dollars are being and the resources are being used to the best advantage?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question. And what you're really talking about is integration of services. Are there overlaps? Are there not? Mostly not. Different organizations kind of specialize in different things. The organization that we're probably closest to is the Bissell Center, but we do think our approach is different. We serve a different clientele in different ways. So they have an employment program, but it's really based around skills development. They do childcare. In fact, many of the people that come and access services Boyle Street on their way to come to Boyle Street are dropping off their kids at Bissell's childcare thing. So that's an example, and a very minute example of the type of integration that's going on. In terms of how the services operate, I think when we're talking about things like the Mustard Seed and the Hope Mission, those are shelters. So they're there to provide shelter, overnight shelter and supports. And they do other things as well, but that's primarily where you go. It's emergency shelter, right? That's their model. That's what we do. Boyle Street, our downtown location, we only operate during the day. And we only operate from 8 to 4:30 unless it's winter time, in which it's 7 days a week, 8 to 8. And so that's because we can provide services during the day, then the shelters open up at 8 o'clock and people can go into that space too. It's good because someone's always got a place to go, but it's that system that when we talk about the cycle of poverty, it's very difficult to exit that system. And we say people that are entrenched in the cycle of homelessness and going through that 8 to 8 and then 8 to 8, the chances of them coming out of poverty in that system, 19 to 20%. That's what studies will show you. Whereas a housing first approach, where we're working with that person, getting them into a home, getting them the supports they need, wrapping services around them, you can get that up to 50, 60% success rate on first try in those sorts of spaces. We have a health model, but there are the health facilities in the downtown core as well too. So there's lots of interplay where we provide nurses, other places provide doctors, and we'll do lots of referrals back and forth in those spaces. But there is the George Spady is a detox space and has another harm reduction reports as well too. So we'll be referring people in there. When you work as a frontline worker at Boyle Street, you're working with other frontline workers and other service agencies all the time. You need to provide the best services to those that you're working with. So it's complex and it's a big system and it's a big challenge. So that's a small piece of it, but I thank you for your question. There's lots of misconceptions that we all do the same thing. And we try not to do that as best as possible. We all have our specialties. So any other questions? Yeah, for sure.
I used to be on the board of the E4C. Are you still interacting with the E4C?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
at the time when I was on the board, there was a move to not to integrate, but to work in conjunction with E4C. Are you still working with them, or are you're probably still working with them?
Yeah, we are still working with them. And we don't have a formalized partnership, but again, at the frontline level in terms of supporting people, they're aware of our resources, we're aware of them. There's exchange of information all the time. So yes, absolutely. That's another partnership that we could speak to in a big way. And I think partnership's important here, but we can't just be talking about partnership in terms of the service delivery agencies and the charities in the area. What we know and what we know works best is we need partnerships across various different industries and in various different spaces. And that's why this new project, the King Thunderbird Center, is really about doing things differently. You know, this hasn't been announced yet, so maybe keep it in this room. But we're 80% of the way there in terms of our fundraising goal. Our fundraising goal was $28.5 million. We're 80% of the way there. We don't have a dime of government money. That's all money that's come from the community. Partners like the Brick and Capital Power and Qualico, and of course the Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation. But nearly $3 million of that is community raised. $5, $10, $100,000 donations from Edmontonians that just care and that are engaged in that way. And when we're thinking about innovative practice in the way that we're engaging and how we want to move projects forward, we want to be partnering with people, because it's all well and good. I can come here and say homelessness is an issue. We need housing. We need to get better services. We need additional funding. We need a better healthcare system. I'm supposed to say that. I'm the senior manager of communications engagement for Boyle Street Community Services. I'd say that 1,000 times and people would say this. But when the head of Qualico, when Dave Friedman at the Brick says it, he says it once and it turns heads. And that's the kind of partnership that we need and that we're looking for in this work. And when we talk about integration of services, it goes beyond just the sector itself. We need to be looking at this problem holistically as a community. And there's some great, outstanding business leaders out there that are seeing that and are taking up that mantle. And there's some amazing faith groups that are coming together and want to do meaningful action and change in their community. It's why I feel very honored to be here today. And this is an outstanding congregation in a really important space. And so thank you very much for your support and for taking interest in this in that way. The King Thunderbird Center is a replacement facility for our downtown community center. That downtown community center, that blue building right next to the arena, sometimes has tents in front of it, sometimes doesn't, oftentimes has a lineup so that people can go and access their funds at the bank. It operates out of what used to be an old banana ripening warehouse. Yes, I didn't know that was a thing, but it was, because 105th Ave used to be train tracks and that the bananas would be jumped off there. It was intentionally dark. It's intentionally boxy. We've done the best that we can as an organization, as a charity. And I'll tell you, our maintenance manager, Joe, I don't know how he does it, but he keeps that place both looking clean and operating to the best of our ability, but it simply doesn't work anymore. One of the things you may be seeing, we talked about mental illness, but also physical ailments. And many of those that we serve use walkers. In fact, we had a walker clinic last week. We gave away 48 walkers. 48 walkers. Many of the people that we serve have physical barriers and our building is not accessible. We have one ramp. Half the building is required to do 20 stairs. It's inaccessible for those that we serve. In the last 7 years, we've had 5 major floods. We actually can't get flood insurance in our building anymore. The last time it flooded, we paid a $50,000 deductible. For an organization and a charity, even as large as ours, it's just unattainable anymore at this point. So we needed a change. We needed to find something. We needed to do things differently, and we needed to innovate, and we needed to find partners. And we have. And through the generous donation from the Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation, through all of those lovely 50-50s during COVID. Thank you very much. Partnership amongst some important stakeholders in our community. We were able to purchase a facility just 2 blocks from our existing facility. It's on 107A Ave on 101st Street. It used to be a paintball place. Before that, it was, I think, the headquarters for Edmonton Public School Board. The Mennonite Center was in there for a while. It's a big concrete box. It's actually a campus. There's housing on site that we've purchased and now are operating and putting people into. And we want to renovate and dramatically change that building to serve our needs as an organization. You heard the name Ogama Okiatsu Gamek, King Thunderbird Center. That was a name gifted to us by the elder that works with us, Elder Clifford Cardinal. He is working alongside us directly on this project, both from a fundraising standpoint, but also a culture and ceremony standpoint as well too. And he has helped our design team make sure that every aspect of the building from an architectural standpoint is respectful of Indigenous culture and is designed to meet the needs of the services and those that we serve. And I think it's important to note that Indigenous people are disproportionately represented in our homeless population. They make up maybe 12% of Edmonton's population, and we'll see about 70 to 75% of the people that we serve have some sort of Indigenous descent. So doing this thing in the right way with culture and ceremony informed by an elder has been at the forefront and the heart of this work and this project. We're also shifting the way that we do work. Our current building is a disaster, but it also represents a very old-fashioned way of approaching work of dealing with those experiencing homelessness and poverty. What we have now is what we call a shopping mall approach. So a big drop-in or food court in the center of our building, and then various stores or services that people have to go to access different things. Unfortunately, though, just the nature of how that is set up is a barrier to our community. If you are experiencing homelessness and poverty and you're fighting several addictions, barriers, maybe addictions, maybe mental health crisis, that, like I said before, comes from generally a sustained amount of and serious amount of trauma in your life. And having to go to different service providers and tell that story over and over and over and over again, even though it's to professionals, people that are caring, people that are loving, in a space that is designed for you, that in and of itself is a barrier for our community. So what we're going to do in this new center is, rather than putting our drop-in or a food court in the center of our building, we're actually putting our community members in the start of the building, and we're surrounding them with an interdisciplinary team that has a healthcare professional, that has a social worker, that has a peer support worker with addictions and mental health background, that has a cultural worker that can provide that cultural support in a direct and meaningful way. This entire facility is really revolutionizing the way that we're approaching working with homeless folks downtown. And we are going in this way because we know it works. We've done it in other facilities on a smaller scale, and the success have been outstanding. We know if we surround people with the services that they need, rather than asking them to go and get them, it works. That's why we're so passionate about this project and why we're calling on everyone to ask for support. Now, some of the downside. 2 months ago, during a subdivision and appeals board hearing, Boyle Street lost our development permit. It was revoked. There's obviously opposition in the community. It is small, but it is loud and curiously well-funded. And unfortunately, they came after our building and the uses that are permitted in that space. Though the uses that are permitted in that space are exactly the same uses that are permitted in our current location, opponents to the project were able to argue that the Indigenous cultural supports, the ceremony, the prayer that we offer as an organization, is not a health service, but a recreation service. It's offensive. And in a place of worship, I think if anyone called this space recreation, I think you'd all be offended too. But it's okay. We have a new plan and a better plan, and we will win. We're 80% of the way there in terms of fundraising. This project, we've purchased the building. This project is going to happen. We'll be getting a development permit likely in the next 2 weeks. It may be appealed. It may not. Regardless, the new plan and design for now has stripped out the Indigenous cultural components and pieces of the work. Yes, unfortunately, to get us through this permitting stage. Then we will be going to the city of Edmonton. We'll be asking for a rezone. We're also gone to Health Canada and asked for a clarification around what health services are and what Indigenous health services are. And we've got our minister working on that already. Part of the reason why I wasn't able to be here 2 weeks ago was I was in Ottawa lobbying for this, and we've received really good news back from Health Canada on it. We will get into this building will be built, and it will provide the services, all of the services that we provide as an organization, including Indigenous culture, ceremony, and practice. What can you do to help? I think right now we need two things from you as an organization. We need your support and talking about it in your community. This project will be in the news. It will be a topic of conversation in the coming weeks. We're about to head into a provincial election. We hope it isn't an election issue, but it may become one. And so the more that you can do to say that you've heard about this project, you think it's the right way to go, and you to tell that to your community, tell that to your MLA as they knock on your door, from all parties, let them know that this is something that you care about and that's important. I think the other thing that we really need at this point is a demonstration of the support we know that we have in the community. $3 million community fundraised for one project is an immense accomplishment. It's not mine. It's our director of development, actually, Laurel McCullough, who's stewarded that work. But sometimes stats get lost in terms of what they actually mean. And so what I propose is a letter writing campaign. Write to your city councillor. Let them know that this is something that's important to you. You can mention the SDAB decision, but you don't have to. You can mention that you're angry about what it means and how it's impacted our organization, a charity, but you don't have to. What we really need from you is just a demonstration of support, that this project means something to you, that you worried about vulnerable Edmontonians, that this is a charity and organization that's doing things differently, and that you support it. Even just 20 letters can change a councillor's mind. And that's really what we need right now. With that kind of ends the formal presentation. However, I did say, obviously I work with a very unique population. And our organization does that. And as I said off the start, there's lots of stigma, lots of misconceptions about the people that we serve. So I'm an open book. If you have questions, if you have things you want to know about how substance use impacts people's lives, a little bit more about substance use themselves, that's oftentimes a topic of conversation people want to know about. More than willing to answer those, but any aspect of the work that we do, I'm happy to field questions on.
I think I need a little clarification. Now, you already have that old public school headquarters, so you already have a building.
Yeah.
Okay, now I thought there was some objection to the proximity to Rogers Place. Was there not? Weren't they objecting to having it too close to Rogers Place?
No, we're actually moving further away from Rogers Space by 2 blocks. Right now we're across the street. The opposition comes from community and landowners and business owners in the surrounding area. It's misplaced. There's a lot of frustration and anger about what's going on in downtown, particularly in Chinatown. But we're moving a building 2 blocks. We're not coming into the community. We're already there. We've made that really clear to our opponents, but you'd have to ask them as to why they're opposing a charity and going after a helping organization.
I wrote to my city councillor, as I said, Elliot, and he said that he supported the center, the new building, but he thought that you should work on developing more friends in your neighbors. And when I looked at the videos, I thought you had pretty good relations with the Oilers group and the Brick, and I think those were pretty strong friends that you have there. So I think that it's certainly good that I wrote to him and made him aware of this. He said he couldn't do anything about the subdivision appeal board hearing, so he assured me he couldn't do anything there. But
yeah, this is why we need a letter writing campaign, and we need to show the support from the public. One of the biggest frustrations with this project is because of, I don't know, maybe it's who we serve or the work that we do. Our politicians are often really willing to say in a letter back and quietly that they support us. But what we need is action. And so if we're not going to get it from the political leaders in our city, we need our citizens to call on them to be more direct in their support and their work on this. And as I said, we're 80% of the way there, not a dime of government money. We've got a grant into the federal government that we feel really confident in, but our city needs to be stepping up and our province needs to be stepping up too.
Do you have a sample letter somewhere that we could base a letter to our councillor on?
I don't have one specifically. That's certainly something we could provide. It sounds like there might be a really good one right here.
I'll email you, Margaret.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, we talk about letter writing campaigns and you want to say everything and do everything and make sure you're hitting all the key. Just sending even 3 sentences. I support the project. Here's why. This is important to me. That a councillor has to respond to that, right? An MLA has to respond to that. A minister has to respond to that. So we don't have to overcomplicate this. Say how you feel and what you mean. I think one of the concerns we do have sometimes is I think councillors receive a lot of templated letters that say the same thing. So we do want that uniqueness. But if you want to talk a little bit more about that offline, but it doesn't need to be complicated either.
We have a few more minutes. I'll come to you, Cindy, online on Zoom, and then we need to give our Zoom account to somebody else this morning, but we can stay here in this room and continue talking.
I'm the grandmother of a student at VicComp. And earlier in the summer, when the politicians were making the rounds of different communities, I also live in a highly Indigenous community, Prince Charles.
Okay.
And so, you know, they come out and they ask questions, and the topic of the new building came up and what were my feelings, because all they're getting is negativity. And I was speaking to both my counselor, my MLA, and the school board trustee. And I think it's really important that we let the schools know, especially that school, but other schools in the area, find out what their concerns are so we can counter them with facts. Because like you say, they're mighty voices, they're loud voices. They may not be a lot of them, but they're loud. And to be honest, many of them have money. And so money is power sometimes, right?
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. We encounter that a lot. And I am a Victoria School graduate myself, actually. And that place has been really important to me. I've signed the back of the theater and my name's there. You know, again, I think we are working directly with both the Edmonton Public School Board, our trustee, but also administration at Victoria School and the school council that is actually the legal representative and actually speaks on behalf of the school. All of them have remained neutral and are working with us directly on safety plans and misconceptions. There's a group of people, many of them are actually, there's no doubt they have a connection to the school in terms of their children, but actually live in the community, the surrounding community. And so that I think is drawing out a lot of frustration from that group. But yes, absolutely. There's also a lot of misinformation about those we serve. And I think what's been lost in the last year for a number of different reasons is that compassionate approach to these really significant challenges. We've unfortunately shifted back to a narrative of safety, increased policing, and the police are our partners, but it's what we need is an interdisciplinary, nuanced approach, and we need to come from a place of love, from a place of care, and a place of understanding as best we can. I think we've lost that as a community in the last year, just in some of the narratives that have been out there. And so the interesting thing is, I know Edmonton is a generous and caring and loving city. I've seen it for 7 years as I've worked at Boyle Street Community Services, but we're also a very humble place. And it's time for those that support us. We need you to not be humble. We need you to be loud.
Can you speak a little bit to the fact that I think there's a bit of a myth around the fact that homeless people are the problem, when in fact it's the folks who prey on them and the groups that prey on them that cause some of the issues in our community.
Yeah, that's a great point and a great thought. When we say we work with the most vulnerable, they are. And some of the challenges that we have is that they are oftentimes preyed upon because of their vulnerability. There was a story this week of a gentleman who was just arrested, who was trafficking in women he knew to not have addresses. Unfortunately, I took a call from a media this week asking me about that. And I said, it's not only a story that we know it all too well. And it's regularly a challenge that we spend a lot of time supporting those that we serve and trying to get them safe, getting them outside of back doors, getting them out of unsafe situations at home. So you're absolutely right. A lot of the challenges that we're seeing and the concerns of safety come not from those people that are experiencing homelessness and poverty, but those that prey on them. Yeah, it's development@boylestreet.org is the email. I have some business cards. I didn't bring enough. I'm sorry. That I'll leave out there as well too. If you want to email me directly, that works as well. Yeah, my mom has it as well. She's our ambassador, Boyle Street ambassador. She had a very direct conversation with the mayor this week.
Right. The other challenge I have, I'm not the chair of council, so I can say this. The other challenge I have is for those of you who are eligible for Alberta's affordability payments, one place to send that money, if you don't need it personally, would be to Boyle Street Community Services and this project.
That's a really nice idea. Yeah, I mean, talking about King Thunderbird specifically, yeah, of course, we're still fundraising. We still have 20% to go on that. But what I've learned, I have many privileges getting to do the work that I do. The people that I work with, the community that we work with. It's a really loving and caring and compassionate place. We deal with really hard issues, and it's a really challenging, but we do it with humor and humility, and I'm really proud of the colleagues. But one of the things outside of that I have come to learn as I've managed the fundraising team for a while like I did and just spending 7 years is just the overwhelming generosity of Edmontonians. Edmontonians really care about this issue specifically. They really care about the challenges that we're facing as a society. I mentioned the opposition to the project, and that's top of mind, obviously, because of what we're doing. But that is such a small minority, and so completely different to my experience working for this organization and the care and compassion that Edmontonians have for this. So I just want to note that as well.
And we can tell how much care and compassion you have for the project. And I want to thank you for spending this hour with us this morning. Yes, an hour. And we really appreciate the time and all the content. My head is full of all the content that's swirling around in there. I would have many more questions, but we're really thankful.
Well,
for
as
your
I
time
said,
today.
it was truly my pleasure and my honor to be here. And so thank you for having me.